Commercial for teenage moms. Can't get some milk. Don't drink the fried milk. She does. And eat it. She said, is that good? Yeah. Let me try this.
Does anybody have their cell phone on them? That can you check just to make sure we are streaming for sure? I mean, I could maybe.
I got a notification.
Did you? Okay, well that's usually a good sign. Because I have this.
And I clicked off of it, so let me check to make sure that was actually.
Yeah, I got a notification too. Okay, okay, cool. I wouldn't be able to. I probably could check with this call going, but.
Be kind of interesting to find out.
Now, Rachel, if you got to the very bottom of that and found a scoop for me, it would have been
The food smells good. Oh, you know what I need? I need coffee. Could you give me a coffee, please? I got room over here to put a coffee cup, as long as I don't tip it over.
There's a nice spot right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a little bit more awkward.
Yeah.
Than the side.
No, it's just that one would actually. Oh yeah.
Big.
Okay, where's your partner in crime?
Which one? This one?
No, the other one.
My sister?
Yes.
Her mother-in-law.
Her mother-in-law passed away.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Beer did tell me that.
Mhm.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Around 1 o'clock.
Creamer?
in the morning.
Yeah, that's what she said.
What I got?
Yes, I don't know who you were asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
I was like, I know you know I want creamer.
No, I'm good. I had some in here, so.
They were all
I
Put a
don't
little
really like
pepper.
her. She
The
has,
official
it was like
bird
a
of every
matter
city.
of hours. that
Turkey
the
vulture?
nurse and-
Oh,
Turkey.
So she had.
Okay, so let's see.
eating or drinking.
John led a prayer last
She
week.
was in and out of the hospital.
One of you guys want to do a prayer tonight?
Kept giving her morphine.
It's right there, so.
Yeah. I was coughing.
You can? Okay, okay. He starts. You both were kind of going, I don't know. It's kind of loud. I didn't know if you guys heard me or not.
They were with her all day, most of them.
Thank you, Jody.
This was a response of mine.
Oh, I heard you're not supposed to drink, because she had said to
That's
me
what you
before
usually
she
say.
No, he.
Well, we're not going.
She hadn't passed.
Well, it's 6 o'clock. I just started. It's time to start. Well, this is.
The thing of it is normally you don't have any room over there to set a coffee.
Yeah, I usually don't have room. Now I got this a little bit nicer, or bigger, I should say bigger table. Girls are coming in.
I got one notice on an email. On YouTube.
So
Bet you that's-
I'm going to bump this down a little bit. We're going to, it's going, okay.
One notice on email, on YouTube, it was midweek.
Okay.
This is the 12th.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. I'm gonna leave that going. Since it is time for us to get started and it's time for us to, hey, hi, John. That's weird. We're talking to each other through our technology even though we're in the same room.
That makes us teenagers.
I look different.
Yeah, you have a whole body.
Yeah, online it's just Wednesday night. This camera is like right there.
No, you look good on mine. I like that.
I don't know. I was looking at myself today. I was glad that they're only showing this far
Job
out.
chapter 30.
Yeah, Job 49 tonight.
Job 49.
I think we're going to be in Acts tonight. We're going to get started while y'all are turning over to the book of Acts and trying to.
Not in Job? Oh,
Hold on.
We're going to start with, does anybody have any good news or thankful news? Table number to my left.
one. I thought I shut you off. You're annoying.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn this conference call thing off here in a minute if Laura doesn't call in.
Thankful that for my sister and the way she's taken care of her mother-in-law these last days. She's been really supportive of the family. I mean, I don't think they could have functioned without her. And she was, I I mean, she was there, she was taking care of her and making sure that, you know, this person, this, and the son that lives there, you know, do this, do that, so. She's been really strong for her.
So at camp many years ago, a tradition started in, I think it was a younger boy's cabin. I think Hayden might have been in the cabin at the time, but one of the other counselors started, Who Did You See Jesus In Today? And that just kind of reminded me of that, you sharing that about her and helping. And, yeah.
And sometimes people step up that you don't expect.
I told her she missed her call as a home health aide or something, because she's doing it all.
Very good. Anybody else over there? There's,
Thankful for the beautiful day,
And that you're
being able to have my mom here.
yeah.
He's thankful that you got me to
It's
step
not the
up for next
same
week.
if she tells you what you're to be thankful for.
It was a beautiful day. I mean, it's been chilly the last week. I don't know. The sun was out.
Good bowl of chili, sounded good, yeah.
Yeah.
That's tomorrow.
Ooh. Middle table. Now we're having family conversations about what we're going to have to eat. That's and y'all are eating Dairy Queen and
We're not
McDonald's,
having, we're not having chili tomorrow.
Blizzards.
I know what for dinner tomorrow.
I'm thankful for today. I finally went back to my cancer doctor after a year and everything is okay. I asked him about the liver, that mass on my liver. He said, don't worry about it. It's just like a tumor or something, but he said, don't worry about it. This Dr. Tab is taking care of that. And I'm also thankful too, I got our electric bill and our heating credit is finally on there. It says you are overdue. So I don't have to pay nothing.
Man, speaking of heating, you get up in the morning, you have to turn the heater on. By the end of the day, you're turning the air on. It's just, I just hate hearing that. I'm like, it's May. We should just be able to turn everything off and give it a month or 2 or 3 and before you turn anything else on. Anyway, but it's good that you have doctors that are working with you and that you're comfortable with. That's important.
That's
Sometimes,
awesome.
yeah, because sometimes people can't find a doctor that's. I think he is too down there.
I'm thankful that Mom is a whole lot better.
We're thankful you're on a whole lot.
He even just raised. So if you're not watching this, well, you're not watching him. You're watching me, obviously. Hello. He just raised his broken arm. Well, it's the one that was broken.
But it's gonna
And I
happen.
bet you're thankful too.
And
But
I'm
you-
thankful to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here.
It's weird, it is.
Yeah, it's like, wow, we have you here
Last time we were in
tonight.
the other room, and I had Miss Opal next to me.
Yeah, and we were studying something completely different, right? We were going through the book, yeah. And Anita's here tonight, so it's good to have you here. Like the class is growing. Chloe, I saved you. She almost took your seat. I said that.
I spoke up for you for
You yeah.
Okay, I'm making myself cry. I'm thankful for God's presence in times of trouble and His provision for us when we need.
Yes, amen.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for my girl Friday.
You said that last week. Are you recycling ones?
Well,
That's okay. It's okay. Chloe recycles hers.
Oh, okay.
she's not called off this week. No, actually, I'm thankful that you count me worthy enough to teach a class for this group. And man, I'm so thankful that get to be here. We drove 100+ miles to get here, didn't we, Doug?
Wow. So
They
that's
went out to Emily City.
so that's why y'all have McDonald's and Blizzards and making me hungry. Really hungry. It smells good.
And I'm thankful. If I need, I have a furnace tonight.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
that's
heard you were having
Mom's
some.
thankfulness.
That's Mama.
Yeah.
You're up now.
Okay. I am very thankful that our electricity, our plumbing, and our furnace is fixed. And we didn't blow up, thank you God. And I'm thankful that I finally got some medicine to where I'm breathing better.
It's good.
Guy told her, he said, "You're lucky you're still alive." He says, "This, you've got to have rayon seeping into this house when your furnace kicks on."
Carbon monoxide.
You hear
All kinds of
stories.
crap.
You hear all kinds of stories. There was that lady was it within the last week over in, was it West Bloomfield or something like that? 42?
I got a new furnace.
I don't know what happened.
I got a humidifier on my furnace. I got a new toilet. What else do we get new?
The electric
Electricity.
outlet.
I'm thankful.
Well, it's not new, but it's got new wires.
You're thankful for what?
Elevator music.
So that's gonna get shut off here any minute. I've been eyeing the time. Like I'm gonna. If you are watching this, if you are on YouTube and you're watching this, and you got like 2 minutes to call that conference call number, or that's getting disconnected because
Oh, so we still have 2 more minutes of it.
maybe. I try to be patient with it, just to give people a chance. Laura, I think you're about the only one that's utilized it consistently. Every once in a while, we have somebody else hop on. I think more people used it when we weren't together, but
I've tried.
My phone won't do it either.
I tried
Metro thing.
4 different times. It wouldn't let me.
really,
Metro used to not let you use those conference call numbers like that at all. Now I think they do, but you have to do a special thing to get it.
strange. That's interesting. Addison, you look like you're ready to say something. We can skip you.
3 o'clock days.
Yeah, I'm thankful for early afternoon days
Okay.
from work.
Yeah.
Short days.
But early afternoon is still a long day because you went in at what, like 6:45 you started and
Having
Yeah.
more time in the afternoon.
yeah.
Wait, you don't have 10 o'clock meetings? 10 p.m. meetings? I had a 10 o'clock meeting last night.
So there's pros and cons to working online, and I think that sounds like a con. 10 o'clock meetings.
Yes, it does.
You gotta be available 24/7.
Yeah.
It wasn't, yeah. Oh, I'm so tired.
So
With the
so
low bang, it's my head going together.
so John's thankful for Girl Friday, and Chloe tonight is thankful for technology and for friends. And did anybody ever tell you that when we were out of town, you had mentioned that that's what Chloe was, and then we all laughed. That's what we were laughing at. When you were wondering what we were on.
We kept
We
wondering what happened.
we signed in, and then we started laughing, and then we hung up because YouTube started working. But anyway,
Oh.
Chloe, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. What do you?
I really don't have any right now.
Well, are you girls thankful for what's going on Friday?
Yeah.
You looking forward to that? Do you even know what's
Don't
going
you
on
reference
Friday?
Joe Wells? Yeah.
She's like, what's going on
You
Friday? Remind me.
Joe Wells.
Yeah, because Rebecca's gonna get off work early.
Friday?
Yeah,
Or
Or you
didn't
can
you,
just
didn't you
drop
tell me
her
that she's coming in late tomorrow?
you can just drop her off whatever.
Well,
So
anyway,
sorry, maybe I shouldn't have divulged that or said anything. You guys could talk about work out your family differences a little later.
out of the building.
Rachel? No? Thankful for?
Are you thankful for
Art supplies.
art supplies? Okay.
Chloe's thankful for that too.
Do you guys do any journaling in your Bibles? Have you seen those Bibles? I don't. Do you do that, Vera? Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. I'm thankful that I have been able to spend more time with my family out of the house.
I'm so thankful for that too.
Do you have a pretty good boss? Is it good to work for? Yeah.
The best boss.
The best boss? Did you hear that,
I'm gonna
Chuck?
go get another job.
Did you hear that, Chuck? Chuck, did you hear that? John's the best boss. Is that?
I'm getting her a shirt made for her that says, "Jesus is my boss, Pop is the crew chief."
That'd be cool. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. Well, people on YouTube, if you've not called in the conference call by now, you're not going to. So I'm hanging up.
I said they need y'all need Jesus, and that should be their uniform.
We got those hats. We got plenty of that.
Chloe, we already asked you. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Yeah.
So along with like what I usually say, the technology and friends, I am thankful that tonight I finally got to role play with some of my friends. that I've not been able to role play with.
On
yet,
on Minecraft, yeah.
On that world, I've not gotten to play with them.
So for me to just expound on this a little bit, like they go on and they play, you know,
Like every
what
Friday
these little
night.
stories every Friday night, and like every Friday night for the last I don't know how long, month or two, it's been crazy. We've been busy,
And so,
gone.
Rachel can't get on that server.
but this
That's
is
weird.
The other server. I don't.
You'll have to help us figure it
Yeah, maybe you do a video call and walk through it or something.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just all Ramos, but there's another.
I don't know. It has to do with Minecraft, and that's
Right.
she asked. She's like, "You Dad, you should get Minecraft." I'm like, "No, no."
We like that Worldcraft.
Yeah,
That other game.
yeah. Well, it was free. I like free.
Somebody asked me one time, you have
Yes.
games on your phone? I said,
People are watching.
Yeah.
So we do have some.
Yeah, so we have some YouTube viewers. If you're out there watching us on YouTube, I know sometimes we have people from Ohio watching. We have some people occasionally from West Virginia. Sometimes Michelle's grandparents occasionally will watch. So we got to meet them this past weekend, and so that was cool. And they're like, "Oh, we get to see you in person now, you know, meet you in person." So that's they occasionally watch. Wisconsin, people from Wisconsin watch. But it's especially those people in Ohio. We got to be real careful what we say about Ohio during class. We don't want to offend them.
Okay. Then I probably should not speak much on, don't mention sports then.
Yeah, no sports. Something that I'm thankful for is I think after we get done with the book of Acts, we're going to move into, it's going to be a surprise. We've been joking around about the book of Job for so long. I'm just thinking about just diving in and going through Job. And I was thinking about something else. We typically stream, or we always stream through YouTube, but I'm thinking about also streaming through Facebook. And there's ways to do it with software. It gets a little wonky and complicated to me. And rather than dealing with that, I have a cell phone and I know how to stream through that. So I'm thinking about just setting up the cell phone and just using that. It'll work.
Yeah.
And what I'm thankful for is I just found out a life hack. If you need a phone stand, this works brilliant. I tried it out. So, yeah. So, if you need a phone stand, find one of these deals.
They don't make those anymore.
I'm just gonna have to borrow some from you.
We're at the Hazel Park Church of Christ where we collect things
Oh, okay.
that are older. I could find you some.
That's not just people.
There's some in the elder's office. Yeah.
I bet you there's supplies from back when Sally Cleghorn was a secretary.
You know it.
Probably.
Equipment, yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Charlotte took all her stuff with her.
No, she left like hoarded office supplies everywhere.
The second thing that I'm thankful for is John's going to fill in for me next week. So I don't know if anybody heard that or not, but
I heard you, Brent.
he's going to fill in. I don't know. There's something going on with the chairs over there. I think it's. Oh no. All right. But tonight we are not. Oh, Amber, you showed up after we were just about done with thankfulness or good news. Anything you're thankful for? What you eating tonight?
I'm thankful for dinner.
Is that an avocado?
Avocados and pomegranates.
Oh,
All right.
man, everybody's eating.
Well,
Well, you took a vow to stay away from food.
I had chicken and green beans at home.
Uh-oh, I need to. There you go. All right, what book of the Bible are we in?
not Joe.
Not Job.
Acts.
Acts. We're still in Acts. So
We're
excited to figure out what X is.
told me we're in 24.
we're in 24, and we've been keeping up with the alphabet, right?
Yeah.
Tonight's letter. Anybody know what? The
X.
X. Okay, so let me tell you this. I did not come up with this title. Okay, I've been borrowing some of these, and sometimes I've modified them from Ray Exum's notes. So what you're about to see violates English, and I'm pretty sure he was an English teacher. But
She's got a guess.
what's your guess?
Is it examine? Or pretty close?
It's close. It's close.
Example.
How about excuses
Excuses.
of Felix? I didn't come up with that, so don't get upset with me. John's sitting there. He's thinking about shaking his head. All right. So we said basically from chapter
Excuse me.
from chapter 21 on, there's just, it's kind of like one big continuous thought of things going on in this section. Last week in chapter 23, Paul was before the Sanhedrin Council. Real quick, who is the Sanhedrin Council? I mean, we keep talking about them. Who are they?
They're the head rabbis.
All right. So they would be so the chief priest would have been one of them. Yep.
And that's why always when
governing
you
body.
say Gamaliel, I automatically say Paul went to Rabbi U.
Rabbi, you.
Yes. Okay. So the Sanhedrin Council, that was kind of the governing body of the Israelites. They were the religious leaders, the scholarly people. There was Pharisees as well as Sadducees.
I'm the only one that done that.
But remember last week, Paul was standing there before them, and he said some things that got them to fight amongst themselves. Remember why?
And he said, "Yep, I'm a Pharisee."
And what did he bring up about the Pharisees?
Well, absolutely, resurrection.
All right, so the Pharisees believed in the resurrection, and the Sadducees didn't.
And that's what I said last week.
And that's right, and that's why the Sadducees were. That's why they were sad.
Fair, you see, that
Yeah.
means that they believe.
Yeah.
Sad, you see, they don't believe.
And they were sad. Yeah. So Paul threw out that little, "Hey, I'm a Pharisee, and I believe in the resurrection." And then the Pharisees and Sadducees started fighting amongst themselves. But things were so heated and tense that the Sanhedrin Council was
We gotta get him out of here before they rip to him.
right. They were going to rip them to shreds, and so they were just as bad as that mob. That the commander, what was the commander's name?
Oh, we learned that.
We did because
Claudius Lysias.
that's right. He intervened, didn't he, to save Paul yet again from the Jewish people. So after he takes Paul, he takes him back to the barracks for safekeeping. Who appeared to Paul that night by his side and gave him some encouraging, comforting words? All right, Jesus appeared to him. And it was pointed out, Jesus appeared to Paul a lot, right? I mean, there was that vision from heaven. The light shone down to Paul. That was the Lord. The Lord taught Paul directly. So anyway, here's another appearance of the Lord to Paul himself. He gave him encouraging words and comforting words. What was that word of comfort to Paul? But why should he be of good cheer?
Because he was gonna go to Rome.
Okay, so he was going to make it to Rome. Now something that Jesus didn't tell Paul was how he was going to get there.
Right, so it wasn't
And-
exactly how Paul had thought he wanted to go.
And when was he going to get there, right? Because sometimes we as people, we like have pressing needs and concerns that are weighing
Our
heavily on.
timeline and
Yeah,
our wants
yeah, and we want God to answer our prayers now, but God's time isn't necessarily our time.
And he doesn't always answer it in exactly the way we imagine him answering it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure at one time Paul was thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to."
Sail in
Just
there
like every
and
place else,
walk
Corinth,
around.
Athens, I'm just going to sail up there and then start preaching and teaching. Well, he was going to sail up
Go
there.
back and listen to my lesson from this past week, changing the question.
And, you brought up a good point that, sometimes when we're going, because this is obviously a trial for Paul, obviously. But sometimes when we're going through those trials and those hardships, we need to look for silver linings or the positive things. I know we all have, there's bad stuff going on every day. We hear sad news. It's sad that Laura's mother-in-law passed away. We hear stuff like that. So we don't disregard it. We don't downplay it on Wednesday night, but we do try to share uplifting things. And
But like even in that situation, Laura was able to be a blessing to her family
Yeah.
in a way that,
Yeah.
really helped them through that. So had she not been there, they might not have done as well as what they did. So
And I
she
know,
was able to.
and I know that has opened doors of opportunity for her to talk about Jesus with other family members, which is great.
So it was a rough situation, but she did good in it.
So we need to look for the good and for the positive sometimes in things. And I really like, John, what you said last week about, this was a free trip to Rome for Paul. He didn't have to pay anything to travel up there. Free travel expense. Maybe not the way he would have thought about it, but anyway, there was something good. Good can come from bad. Sometimes we forget that.
The thing of it is only during his transport was he chained. So he had freedoms unbelievable the entire journey once he was at a location.
But even through that, getting up there, he still shared Jesus along the way. I mean, we're going to find this guy was shipwrecked, and he got to share Jesus with these people. Shipwrecked. I mean, this wasn't just, fictitious. I mean, things were going down, and people were in panic mode. But anyway, all through that.
Water for a day.
Yeah, I mean, he shared all that. Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. And he found opportunity, despite what he was going through, to always keep sharing Jesus with other people. Also in chapter 23, I mean, to make matters worse, not only did the Sanhedrin Council want to tear him apart, but then there was an assassination plot made on his life. There was about 40 men who took that solemn vow, right? They said, we're not going to eat or drink until Paul is dead. And like John pointed out last week, they must be dead. They died soon because Paul continued to live. The news came to the commander. What's that?
Or they all lied.
Or they all lied. Well, sometimes people take oaths, right, and they don't really mean it. Right? They'll make promises and they don't really keep those promises. The news about that assassination attempt came to the commander. It came by Paul's nephew, and he had Paul escorted to Caesarea at nighttime. It was about 9 o'clock. He was going to have him shipped out of there. Remember how many soldiers in total began the journey?
Two centurions, 200 foot soldiers, 200 spearmen.
I think we calculated it was about 470. Yeah. So you had the horsemen, the spearmen, just the regular soldiers, the 2 centurions. They wanted him to get there alive. Paul eventually makes it there to Caesarea. Took a couple days because they took a rest stop. And Paul and that letter from the commander were delivered to the governor at the time. His name was Felix. And Felix agreed to hear the case, but he required Paul's accusers to be present. And so that brings us up to Acts chapter 24, and again, excuses of Felix. And we'll talk more about Felix and a little bit later on in the chapter. So verses 1 through 9 opens up with a gentleman by the name of Tertullus, and he gives a speech. So we have Tertullus's speech. Luke says here, starting verse number 1, Now after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders, and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, See that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight. We accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. And so let's pause there. Who did the Jews employ to present their case before Felix? It's on the screen.
Tertullus.
All right, Tertullus. And what exactly was Tertullus? How does Luke describe him?
He's an orator.
All right, he's an orator. So other than an orator, he would be what historians would call a Roman advocate. And so they were somebody that was hired. They were good speakers.
He was the press secretary.
Or the prosecuting attorney. Or press secretary. He was a good speaker, and he would have been knowledgeable, right, of the Roman laws. And so they hired him. But how does Tertullus open his speech?
With flattery to Felix, one, and then started giving accusations against Paul,
Okay.
of which
Okay, so we'll get to the accusations first. But he opened his opening comments with flattery. Right. Verses 2 through 3. I didn't put that in my notes. I wasn't going to say that on camera. I'm glad you did. But that's exactly what he did. He was kind of brown-nosing him. I don't know if that's kosher to say either. But anyway, schmoozing him. All right, so he says that they, being the Israelites, enjoyed. Did they really enjoy it? Great peace and prosperity because of Felix's foresight and because of his care. And so they accepted his care always in all places, and he calls him most noble Felix with all thankfulness. That is not the way the Jewish people viewed Rome. They loathed the Roman occupation. So he's very much
so they had to get
using
somebody that wouldn't choke on them.
flattery words. This is what's interesting. At least I found it interesting. That word foresight, right? He says it was by Felix's foresight. That word foresight is where we get our English word providence. And when we talk about providence, we always think about who? It's God. The word providence means caring and giving you what's best. And so here they're using this word that we would never attribute. Well, I don't know if I could say never. Some people, a lot of people would never attribute to a politician.
King James uses the absolute word providence.
Gotcha. And so he was clearly using flattering speech to Felix, trying to butter him up. As John pointed out, verses 5 through 8, Tertullus then moves into some accusations against Paul. Let me just say this. All these accusations were false. There were 3. He starts off with what maybe we would call a character assassination. What did he say that they found Paul as?
Plague.
A plague. Now, that's not really an accusation. That's just his character assassination to start off. Don't lawyers do that today in the judicial system? Like, if you can't beat them, let's just start attacking the person's character. Politicians do it all the time. There's a fancy word for it. It's called ad hominems. You can't win the argument. You know you can't win the argument, so you just start attacking the person's character. You're trying to undermine them so that people won't listen to them. Have you also noticed this in our judicial system? Sometimes you're watching a court case and an attorney will start saying a bunch of stuff. And then the other attorney will say, I object. And then the judge will say, okay, I accept your objection. You know, scratch it from the record. It's sustained, scratch it from the record. Overruled. That means he's going to allow it. But nonetheless, that attorney knows what he's doing. And he'll rattle stuff off that even though he knows it's going to get objected, you know why? Because he knows that there are jury members sitting in the box and they're hearing it. And you can't take those words back. You can scratch it from the official record, but you can't take back what you hear. Yeah. So here you have Tertullus calling this man a plague. Okay, well, how's he a plague? Well, what's the first accusation?
Creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world.
Okay.
Ringleader of
All
the
right.
Nazarene sect.
All right, so we'll get to that one next, but he's a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world. All right, so what is dissension? What do we think of when we think about dissension? We know from Sunday's sermon that it's a work of the flesh, right? That's the word that's used, at least in the New King James Version. What would you think of as dissension?
I would think arguing, dividing.
Okay. Well, one definition would be, and the way that it's used in the works of the flesh, is creating division. The Greek word that's used here is a little bit different. It's a different word. But here the idea is the way the ESV has it rendered, and I'm not sure how the King James Version has it rendered, but it means to stir up riots. In other words, what he was accusing Paul of doing was being the one to create the riots. But as
Because they were the ones creating all those riots.
right, you think about in Athens or Ephesus, what? He wasn't the one out there creating the mob scene. He was just out there telling others about Jesus. They were the ones getting angry and chanting, "Great is Diana," for hours on end.
Well, and how many Jews were following him, so he wasn't creating dissension among all the Jews in all the world.
Yeah, so even this, you would have a bit of what's called hyperbole. What is hyperbole?
Over-exaggeration.
Over-exaggeration. There's some people in our family that loves hyperbole. It's an inside joke. I won't say names. Hyperbole. It's a great exaggeration. Do you think this guy was greatly exaggerating a little bit?
Yeah.
He was causing uprisings and riots amongst the Jews.
That big.
Right? That big. That would be a hyperbole.
The
Yeah.
spider that was this big.
Yeah.
The biggest spider I've ever seen in my life.
There was a spider that jumped out at Jody a couple of weeks ago, and she like spazzed, right? I'm not going to look at her now because I know I'm getting a look. And I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "That spider was that big." I looked at it. No, that spider was like that big. And she says, "Well, when it had its legs out," I was like, "Okay."
She's a whole lot smaller.
But this was a very serious accusation. It was when you smash. Yeah, there was a lot less of them too. It was a serious accusation because you know what Rome didn't like?
Riots.
They didn't like riots.
We like
No,
order.
because that's when they
Yeah.
started hanging people on crosses. And
Yeah.
stuff. Oh, you're creating riots? Hold on.
So this was a very big accusation against him, and Tertullus knew it, and so he's trying to use that. And you know, I think it's interesting too. Yes, Paul preached to Jews. He did. He'd go into synagogues, but he primarily, especially after the first part of his ministry, he went to the Gentiles because they were willing to listen to him. So anyway, false accusation all the way around. Second of all, he was accused of being the ringleader of what, John?
Of the Nazarene sect.
All right, so he's accused of being the leader of the group that came out of Nazareth.
Which is funny, because didn't they accuse Jesus of that at some point?
Probably, yeah. And so really what Tertullus is doing is saying, you know what? He's accusing him of introducing new gods. And that was a violation to Rome. So there's another prohibition that Tertullus is trying to drum up with Felix. And then he's accused of trying to do something to the temple. What was that?
Profane.
Okay, so profane the temple, and which the Jews were permitted to punish. And so he's kind of feeding into both groups of people here, isn't he? But profaning the temple, did Paul profane it? If you remember, what got them all up in an uproar in Jerusalem was actually, there was the hearsay and speculation that he had profaned the temple because people had seen him with some Gentile men earlier in the week. So that accusation was false, and it was based on hearsay. Is hearsay allowed in the court of law?
No.
It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to have eyewitnesses to things such as that, if you're going to accuse people of it. So then Tertullus goes on and explains that the Jews wanted to handle that according to their law, but it was the commander Lysias that acted violently.
Which was also a lie.
He violently grabbed a hold of Paul and commanded his accusers to come to Felix. So you know what he's saying? And Felix was to settle the matter. So basically what he's saying here, and this is Brian going to insert this into the text a little bit, and I don't think it does it any injustice. Tertullus is saying, so Felix, if you're inconvenienced, it's not our fault. It's Lysias, your commander's fault, because he didn't let us handle it, and he sent Paul up here to bother you along with this letter.
Which is going to cause him a whole lot of grief because automatically, which is he going to believe? Felix is a Roman. Who's he going to believe? Is he going to believe one of his commanders or an orator?
Who are known for telling great big falsehoods.
And so we'll talk about Felix and the conclusion of how Felix viewed things here a little bit later. So here Tertullus gives his great oratory. He practices his great oratory skills in front of Felix. And what was going on? I could just imagine he's there giving his great speech in front of this nobleman. What were the Jewish accusers? Some of the members of the Sanhedrin Council. What were they doing? Right behind Tertullus. I just imagine them. I mean,
Exactly what happened.
Yeah, I was imagining like
These things were so.
I was imagining like they're saying, "Preach it, brother. Go on. Yeah, you keep telling them," and then just kind of egging them on. They were agreeing to all this. So up next, things settle down. Up next is Paul's defense.
And I love that Paul does the same thing. He's like, okay, I like this flattery thing. We're going there. I got you covered.
But he was. Well, we'll talk about it.
But it wasn't like a
he
false flattery. He's
no.
like, hey, listen.
He
I'm
spoke the
glad
truth.
That you're who you
Yeah,
are because
yeah.
I'm going to be able to answer to you, and I know you're going to get this all
Right.
sorted out.
Yeah. All right. So here's Paul's defense. Yeah. I mean, it's great. So verse 10, then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, "Inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with the mob nor with the tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me. Or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council, unless it is for this one statement which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. And so let's pause there. And then let's go back and look at some of these things. I was just reading through there and I was like, I don't even have everything written down that I could have talked about here, because there's so much. But first of all, yes, Paul, when he addresses Felix, his flattery was different.
It was genuine.
It was genuine.
It was like, this is who you are, and I know because of your reputation, I can trust that I'm going to be judged fairly here.
And he was courteous through it. I mean, he spoke the truth and he was courteous about it.
Paul is coming from a standpoint, he's in front of a man who is a Roman legislature.
Yep.
And so Paul lets his Romanism show.
Yeah.
I'm Roman.
So I would say this, you think about it from a political standpoint today, I think there would be a lot of people that would, I forget who's the president right now, but I think a lot of times some people would be like, man, if I could be in front of the president, I let him have it or whatever. But I think Christians should show at least some sort of respect to them because of the position that they hold. That's just, when the Bible says don't speak ill of anyone, I think the president's kind of included in that. So we should be real careful about.
We're admonished to pay honor to those who are elected.
Yeah.
That's what the scripture tells us.
We do have the freedoms to voice our opinions, but you could do it in a nice way, a tactful way.
That's why, even though was this great dispute over this past election, the moment that he was sworn in, that became my president. Though I did not vote for him, he is still my president.
And it goes for whoever might win the election. It doesn't matter who your governor is, or and I know that's big in politics
I feel like
too.
It's not just even, you don't even have to do it on that grand of a scale. Like if you're employed by somebody, and they have authority over you, we're told to
Yeah.
submit to that
Yeah.
kind of authority
Yeah.
with honor and respect to
Yeah.
that. So if you go up the chain, how much more respect and honor should I give as you go up the chain? So if I'm gonna be respectful and honor my boss as my boss, of course, by the time you get up to the president, I'm gonna respect and honor that authority.
Yeah.
We're not always gonna agree with everybody that's in charge,
Yeah.
but we have to learn to act like Christians
Yeah.
and try to get along, because that's what Jesus wants us to do. That's what God wants, and we gotta do it.
I mean, if you're over here on the political aisle and somebody else is over here and you don't like said president, but you get on Facebook or social media and you're constantly bashing them in a really disrespectful way, you're not. First of all, you're hurting your fellow Christian that disagrees with you from political, but then you're also not being a shining light to the world.
And that's gossiping anyway,
Yeah.
and it talks about that in the Bible.
And you were talking about, Vera, about showing respect to your bosses, and I thought, so when Girl Friday says she has the best boss in the world, I hope that's true flattery. You can nod, yeah.
He bought lunch today, that's why he's been wrong.
So one commentary said that Felix, so Paul says he'd been a judge for years, right? Long time. One commentary says probably about 6 years. And I thought this was interesting. Paul says, I'm going to defend myself, right? There's sometimes when people go to court, they don't have a judge, or not a judge, but an attorney. They just represent themselves. And so he didn't need an advocate.
Abraham
Right.
Lincoln says a man who represents himself as a fool for a client.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that must have been after Paul, because Paul was really wise in how he handled all
Yeah.
of these things.
And he didn't need to hire a Roman advocate to intercede for him. I mean, he
knew all the Roman laws.
He knew the Hebrew laws. He knew
Yeah.
the Roman laws. He was brilliant.
So this is why he said, when he says in Timothy, he says, bring Mark, bring my books, bring
Yeah.
the cloak. Oh, make sure you bring the law books.
Yeah. He wanted those books. They were important for him. Yep.
I feel bad.
Verses, I want to talk to you about a post that you shared earlier.
Okay.
But we could do it off camera. It was that mug.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have a mug that says that, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. All right, verses 11 through 13. Paul gives his defense of the charges brought up against him. How long had it been since he'd been in Jerusalem?
12 days.
12 days. It hadn't been that long. So it wasn't like facts could be twisted and distorted after a long period of time, right?
Right.
And it's like 12 days. You really, from Caesarea, you could send somebody down to Jerusalem and have somebody verify that I didn't cause any uproars or riots in the temple. So, out of those 12 days that he was in Jerusalem, he spent 7 of those days in purification and going to the temple. Do you know the other 5 days he was spent in custody? So he was only there free for 7 days. I mean, I guess you could say how much trouble could a person cause in 7 days, but I guess you could. I guess you. Are you talking about your husband?
No.
Because he anyway. So what was his
That particular time.
what was his purpose in Jerusalem? What does he say he was there for?
To worship.
All right, so he was there to worship. So if he was there to worship, was he there to cause mischief?
No.
No.
He was focused on what he was there for, which was worship.
I could really go off on a soapbox. But when we come together on Sundays for worship, it's about God. And we shouldn't be there to try to cause mischief, right? Our focus is supposed to be on God. So anyway, I think I'm just going to move on from that real quick. Verses 14 through 16. What did Paul confess? He confessed to something. Who did he worship?
God, the God of my fathers.
This which they call heresy. So worship I the God of my fathers.
Yeah, so he worshipped the God of his fathers. He's saying, I didn't invent a new God. Right? So I'm worshiping the God of the Jews, in which you allow the Jews to worship. The only difference is the way he worshiped God. And the way that a person becomes a Christian was a little bit different. And he worshiped God according to the way. And so sometimes Christianity was referred to as the way in the book of Acts. What else did he say he strived to have?
Big conscience.
Okay. A conscience without offense toward God and men, a clear conscience. You know, if you're going to have a clear conscience toward God, it needs to be trained. You just are not, it's not just going to happen to you. An athlete is not just going to be a good athlete just by accident, right? It's going to take work.
And when you say training, it's a lifelong training.
It is. And it's...
And we should be continually growing, because if we're ever not growing, we're stagnant, and we're probably going to start.
Yeah, and if you're stagnant, you're just kind of bobbing there. And if you've ever seen
atrophy.
Well, yeah, and if you ever see a moving river, and if something is just kind of stagnant there in the water, you know that current's just going to take you downstream, and you're going to be drifting away. And so, yeah, I mean, it's either you're growing or you're drifting away, and so it is that lifelong process. I mentioned this Sunday morning, but there's a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof is death. And so there are people out there that think their conscience is good, but who have been training that conscience.
This was the same argument that Paul had given about what he did causing havoc upon the church. I did that with all clear conscience.
So sometimes you can have a clear conscience, but your conscience could be wrong because it was mistrained.
That's why it frustrates me when people say they're following their heart.
Yeah. Sometimes your heart will take you on the wrong path.
Because sometimes my heart, and I've been a Christian for the better part of 20 years, sometimes my heart doesn't exactly lead me where I think God would want me to go, and I have to go, well, where would God want me to go in this?
Yeah.
So,
Have you heard sometimes people will say, well, God wants me to be happy. Well, and I say, he does. He does want you to be happy. No, God doesn't want anybody to be sad. But you know where happiness comes from?
God.
Obeying God. That's where true happiness comes from. It all comes back to God. And, yeah, some people struggle with that. Verses 17 through 21, what did he bring to his people? He described him as his nation.
Alms and offerings.
Alms and offerings. While he was in the temple, what did some of them, how did they find him in the temple?
purified.
He was purified. So they didn't need to have some mob rioting there in the temple, beating him, tearing him apart to try to examine him, to figure out everything that was going on. There were some people there that knew he was purified. He purified himself according to the customs. How does Paul say, or who does Paul say should be at this meeting with Felix?
The accusers.
The accusers, the originators of the mess. So more than just the Sanhedrin Council. I don't even know if all the Sanhedrin Council was there, but maybe the chiefest amongst them were there. Not just them, but those
that brought them to the council. Those are the accusers.
And those accusers would have been those Jews from Asia Minor. You remember, they were the ones that came down from Asia Minor who came to Jerusalem, and then they began to cause problems for Paul. And you can see that in Acts chapter 21 and verse 28. So what reason does Paul give for being on trial before Felix?
The resurrection of the dead.
Right? So that's the whole reason. Right? He had that meeting with them. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. But because he made that one statement, which was brilliant, but he made that statement, they got into an uproar.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it made him angry.
You remember how he said that this was this tedious thing? It was the commander. No, I want to correct that.
Yeah, it wasn't the commander.
It was because I said something about the resurrection of that.
And maybe Luke kind of paraphrased some things here. Maybe didn't give us all the details. I just wonder, in the back of my mind, if Paul said in there somewhere, by the way, your commander, he was a good guy. He's actually the one that saved me. Although he wanted to beat me, but he did the right thing. But I mean, he saved Paul a couple times. Yeah, I mean, he did save Paul on a couple of occasions. But anyway, as far as we know, he didn't bring any of that up. But yeah, Paul was basically on trial because the Sadducees and Pharisees, they were fighting so much to the point that they wanted to tear Paul apart. And it had to do really with that comment that he made about the resurrection. Just kind of made things worse. The end of the chapter here, we read about Felix. Felix's fear, verses 22 through 27. Luke says here, verse 22, but when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, now let me pause there for a second. That's why I kind of get the idea that maybe Luke abbreviated some things here, because he had a more accurate knowledge of Christianity. But we can talk about that here in a second. And he said this, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he, being Paul, reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. And here we have another cliffhanger. All right, so verses 22 and 23. Felix had a better understanding of the knowledge of the way. So from verse 14, he understood this from Paul's statements that Paul worshiped the same God as the Jew, or the Jews. And so he was getting it. Kind of a light bulb was going off. But who did Felix call for before he made his final decision? He wanted to talk to somebody else before making any decisions.
His commander.
All right, his commander, Lysias. And that makes sense. So while Paul was being held, what liberties did Felix give to him?
All the liberties. He said, if he has people who want to come and visit him, or they want to provide for him, or if he wants to visit them, he's under house arrest, but he's not, again, like I said, in chains. He has freedoms that most prisoners would not have.
It's an almost unheard of thing in Roman judgments to have that kind of liberty as a prisoner.
So it was pretty nice that they afforded that freedom to him. Now, prisons back then were much different than they are today. I mean, today you can send people money or have money put onto an account. Then they can go to, would it be called a commissary? Do they have commissary in the prisons? And then they can buy supplies and whatnot. They're taken care of. They're provided meals. They're given clothes. Maybe not the best of clothes, but they're given their uniform. Back then in the first century, the only way you were going to eat or be taken care of is if you had people come in and bring you supplies and help you. And so at least, Felix was nice in that regards, to give Paul some of that liberty to have friends come in. Verses 24 through 26, some time passes, and Felix thinks, hey, my wife Drusilla, she's Jewish. Maybe she would like to hear some things from Paul. So he brings Paul in. And what did Paul teach them concerning specifically? How is it phrased there? All right, so let me get back to the text. And they heard him concerning the faith in Christ. So what Paul was teaching was not his own personal opinions or beliefs. Oftentimes when you read that phrase, the faith, it is talking about the Christian standard of faith. He's talking about Christianity. He's teaching them, remember Jude verse 3, we contend earnestly for my opinions. Oh no, we contend earnestly for the faith, right? The gospel standard. We fight to defend the faith. And there's other verses that...
If you check that in original text, the word that's translated the, okay, automatically would have been capitalized. It would have been emphasizing that it is the truth.
Yep. So there are times that it talks about faith, and then that would be a personal faith. So you got to be careful of the context in which you're reading things. And so here he taught them concerning the faith. It's that same phraseology in Jude 3. He's teaching them about Christianity, how to be a Christian, what you need to do to be a Christian. So not only did he talk to them about that, but he talked to them about some very specific things. Luke mentions here. What were those things that he taught them about?
Righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come.
And what was Felix's response? His immediate response?
You're going to have to go away for now.
Whoa, he was afraid.
He was afraid, and he sent Paul away. What was he afraid of? I'm glad you asked. Now, when he sends Paul away, he says, when I have a convenient time, I'll call for you to hear more about this matter. History doesn't tell us that there was ever a convenient time for him to learn and to obey the gospel. So why was Felix afraid? Because he was a mean, cruel man. This man had married a woman who was on her second husband, and he married her, and this was his third wife. He seduced her and enticed her to leave her husband, who was a king, and to marry him. It was an unlawful marriage, and he was cruel, and he was mean. Historians such as Tacitus called him tyrannical. I'm sure he had people killed. He was politically motivated, career-minded, do what he could do to get to the top. And, that kind of person, do you think they lived a righteous life? Righteous. Well, what is it?
No self-control.
So what is righteous? Righteous is to live right according to God's standard, not my own standard.
So was he afraid that...
He was afraid.
That he was going to be a better person, or that God was going to punish him?
He was afraid of the judgment because he was taught about righteous living. He didn't want to change. He was taught about you need to live a life of self-control. A person that's going to just keep stealing other people's wives, that's not practicing self-control, is it? And he probably did a whole lot of other things. And then he heard about the coming judgment of God. I mean, if you live that way, wouldn't that terrify you?
Hearing about righteousness, and hey, you need to be temperate or under control.
Yep.
And if you're not, you're going to be
You're
judged.
you're going to stand before the judgment seat. And I can just hear Paul saying those kind of things, you know?
So not only did it say to Felix, but to Felix's wife, who'd been married multiple times. And again, she was part of this whole political system too, as well. So, you hear about preachers stepping on toes? Oh, he really did it here. So he just sends Paul back to prison. But what was Felix really hoping for over the course of time?
Slip me some dinero, baby.
Yeah, you slip me some money and then I'll let you out of prison. He wanted a bribe. He wanted some money. But did Paul ever give him that money?
No.
Nope. So how many years passed? 2 years. 2 years. Jesus says you're going to go to Rome, but not today. Paul didn't know how long it was going to be, but it makes you wonder if Paul was sitting there in the prison going, okay. I am sure he still was cheerful and encouraged, knowing that the Lord said, you're going to make it to Rome. He didn't really have anything to fear, but he didn't know how this was all going to play out. But Felix, before Felix left, what did he do to Paul?
He did the opposite of what normal boxers do when leaving office. Normally they give a clemency to someone. Instead, he said, oh no, I'm going to make sure that he stays in prison for y'all.
And why did he keep him in prison? You said for y'all. That's what the Jews wanted.
To keep them happy, keep them
Doesn't that just
Say,
sound?
I need a new post since I'm no longer going to be here.
Doesn't that just sound like a typical politician? Just trying to keep the people happy? Because he knew.
Everything that's happening today.
He knew I released Paul, especially without the bribe. Without the bribe, I mean, a bribe is going to make things better, but without that bribe, now I'm just going to have another headache because the Jews are just they're going to be in an uproar again. There's going to be another riot, and it would be his fault for letting Paul go, even though did he find any guilt in Paul? No, he just did it for one reason. All right, so who took over the governorship for Felix?
Festus.
All right, so I pronounce it Porcius. I think that name might be like where we get our English word porcupine. I think he's a little prickly. I have to.
You say it the way that I've said it.
Yeah. I'll have to research that. But this guy was not. He was not a good guy either. All right, he's just.
If you got pricked by a porcupine, it's a good possibility you're going to fester.
On that note, that brings us up to the end of chapter 24. So I was thinking about this. I was kind of thinking about this. I thought, and I know you could look at a bunch of chapters that would have the same thought, but I think it applies here as well. It just reminds me we need to be ready to give a defense. 1 Peter 3, verse 15, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts and be ready always to give an answer to everyone that asks you the reason of the hope that's within you with meekness and fear. Peter says, be ready to give an answer. Be ready to give a defense. And that is, we saw it in the last chapter, right? He gave that defense before the Sanhedrin Council. He was able to do it again in front of, what was his name? Felix.
The Greek word used there when it says fear.
It's apologia, or the defense is apologia. Yeah.
No. The fear there is eubella. It's the Greek word eubella, which means reverence.
Yeah. Well, you got to do it.
God with reverence.
So when we're defending the Bible, you're supposed to do it with meekness and reverence. And so and that's another lesson. We got to make sure that we're teaching people with the right attitude, in the right way.
Yeah, because if you come at people and they're not going to listen to you.
What does that usually do?
That turns them away.
So what that
they get stubborn and now I don't want to hear anything.
And what that usually does is just it pushes them further into their corner and their thoughts, and then they're just going to be more hard-hearted and try to defend what they believe, even if it's wrong. I mean, you're just gonna. I don't know. I think anyway.
Sometimes it's a whole lot better to love people to where they need to get to go. You want them to know the truth, and it's important to be able to defend the truth, but it's important to be loving in the way that you do it.
Yeah. And so that first part is, be ready to give an answer. Be ready to defend it. Again, it's the apologia. It's where Apologetics Press, that's where they get that word, because some of that has to do with the questions that a lot of people have today is about God and where do we come from, and being able to explain those things, but from the Bible, a biblical perspective. Let's say I saw Jody raising her hand.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, so we have to be able to give a defense for not only the gospel and like what the Bible tells us to do, but also our actions. Mm-hmm. So beating someone's the Bible. I mean, you got to give an answer to God for your actions too.
Yeah, when we use that phrase Bible thumper, it's not that we're supposed to be thumping somebody with our Bible.
I was going to say, sometimes people do need a thump over the head, but
sometimes you can do in a way. Listen, you can tell people how it is in a very firm manner, but also be loving in how you do it. Because guess what? When you correct your children, sometimes it's very firm, but it is done out of a source of love.
And sometimes there could be stages of that too. Mm-hmm. Like, you first address it, you could do it one way, and you try it again. But if the person continuously, for whatever reason, it might get a little tougher along the way.
I'm bringing this before you. When I come before you trying to bring this Bible to you and teach you about Jesus, it's not because I think that you're lost and going to hell is because I want you to go to heaven with me.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between the two,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to hell because you're living this way, doing that, hey, you're not going to win anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I don't want you to.
We have Y and Z left, but there's 4 chapters.
Okay, so Ray doubles back on some of the original letters. I'd have to, yeah.
He goes into the Greek.
I know, I thought.
That'd be
as we were
awesome.
going through, I was like, wait a minute, there's not many.
Yeah. All right.
2 chapters of 1.
No, we're going to say that for
We're using
Job,
that new alphabet.
the new alphabet. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. It's been a great class. Enjoy this time. It's a good chapter. Thank you, and thank you for being here. And I think Chuck's going to, Dad's going to, did it change? All right. He volunteered. They were talking in class.
Yeah.
But you guys, you were texting, and I missed that. Wow, that just. All right. Well, he's a little bit softer spoken, so I'll try to give him. Yeah, I'll turn this around, see if I give him a real loud. All right.
Father in heaven, we're so thankful for another great lesson tonight. We're thankful, Father, that much understanding has come out of the lesson. We're thankful, Father, for all the many blessings. Father, we pray now that you continue to bless all the sick of our number who are not able to be with us tonight. Bless them, Father, and make them well real soon, if it be thy will. And Father, go with us now throughout this night. Continue your wonderful blessing down upon all of us. I give you the honor and the praise and the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye, Bureau.
Good. Good night, YouTube, if you're whoever may be out there.